We hear all the time that the U.S. policy of engagement with China has failed. This is the approach the United States pursued with Beijing since the mid-1990s. It sought a China that liberalized, that opened up economically and politically, that acted as a junior partner to the United States in international affairs, and that didn't challenge the U.S. military position in the Western Pacific. And China fundamentally hasn't done those things. So now there is a new consensus in Washington. It's a consensus against the old engagement approach. But that doesn't mean that there is a new, coherent, stable replacement for the old engagement approach. Right now, there's an anti-engagement consensus, and that opens up space for a new alternative. But I wrote my paper to try to crystallize what a number of positive alternatives to the old policy of engagement might be. What is U.S. foreign policy toward China in a post-engagement world? That's the world we're in. So it matters what kind of conceptual framework the United States puts forward for its relations with China. I mean, you might think what really matters are the specific policies, and the sum of all the policies amounts to what the United States is trying to do. But to determine what kind of policies policymakers want to implement, it helps to have a basic conceptual framework, a set of unifying aims that can make sure that specific policies are pointing in the same direction and are very intentional with what they try to achieve. Right now, I think a lot of people in Washington believe that the U.S. China relationship is stuck, nothing much can be done, and recognizing that the old policy of engagement failed means in some measure just getting ever tougher on China through a variety of measures. But that's not the case. There are at least 4 options that I've identified in this paper for guiding frameworks toward U.S. relations with China that are distinct from the old engagement framework. I think the most realistic and yet still positive scenario for U.S.-China relations would involve a state of what I call competitive coexistence. That means that the United States would accept that it is in a competition with China. It's not seeking or aspiring to have a fundamentally cooperative relationship. But on the other hand, the United States and China would try to work out the terms of coexistence for each power. And there would emerge a stable, somewhat predictable pattern of interaction between the United States and China, rather than the two countries being constantly on the brink of some kind of major crisis and then potentially an outright conflict. So it would take a lot to get to that position, but I think that that is a realistic scenario for U.S.-China relations over the next decade or so.